Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik. I teach comparative Indian language and literature at the University of Calcutta. Today we will discuss Module 25 of the paper Translation Studies, and this module is on translators community in India. To begin this discussion, we need to find answers of few questions. Rather, we have to go ahead a step further to answer few questions. The questions what should be addressed in this context are whether there was any community of translators in pre-colonial India. Why do we need a community of translators, and if the communities are there, what is their role in the practice of translation? Going a step ahead to the question may be helpful to understand the position of translation and translators in India. When we talk about translators community, we hint to know whether there is a professional practice of translation, whether there is specific methods for each type of translation, whether there is good response of translated text in different cultural systems in India. These are the basic issues which will give birth of the community of translators. There might be specific method of translation, and also there might be a good readership of translated text, but common aims of the translators initiates a possibility of birth of translators community. When a society takes translation more sincerely and professionally, translators community also necessitated. In pre-colonial India, it will not be too wrong to claim that there was no as such community understanding or community engagements of the translators, though we can find common trends in different translation works. In colonial India, we find translation as a collective work or at least collaborative work, and thus translators emerged as a group. Groups holds the basic unity of community, as I understand community as a much bigger term than group. In independent India, translation is more systematically patronized by the state. Different institutions are established and each one has their own translation agenda, which let us understand the community autonomy in case of translating. It is not only the issue of pre-colonial or colonial India. In contemporary times, also translations are mostly unorganized, and translating is not commonly observed as a service sector to the people. Translators community also can be understood from the political perspective. The struggle of translators as an organized entity for the betterment of work and their better survival interest also comes from one's identity as translator. Here basic question comes whether translation can be understood as professional job in India, or still it is voluntary, amateurish, and mere academic interest. So one side we are in search of translators community in India, and in other side we are looking for the attitude of translators and the greater society towards the work of translation itself. A sense and identity of being translator came among Indian translators mainly in the British colonial period, when translation was institutionalized and became integral part of administration to rule. This module talks about the history of community building among translators and the story of politics behind it. The first part of the module deals with the medieval India and British modern India and the patronization of translation. And it shows how the patronization of translator brought the changes among the translators to identify themselves as a group of translators. In the second part of the module, I argue, was there at all any sense of community among the translators who are there outside of British patronization? Then this module deals with the conflict between patronization and non-patronized translation and translators. In the third part of the module, I talk about the independent India and politics of nation building and imagination of the nation, one side, and conflict of translators patronized by the government of India and independent translators in other side. Here this discussion focuses with different publication houses, little magazines and communist movement and the situation of translation as a outcome of radical movements. In the conclusion, I will briefly talk about the contemporary situation of translators in India and conflicts of legacies and shows how the contemporary history depicts the translation as a more successful individual work than the group or community work in India. This is how the module shows the evolution of concept of translation and its public life in India. Now, let us talk about translator community in pre-colonial India, or rather, let us talk that whether there was any community feeling among the translators in pre-colonial India. The history of translation in India is more about patronization rather a work of community initiative. We can trace the history of Indian culture of translation in its very beginning in 13th and 14th century AD. Translation was understood as a tool to serve different purposes like translation and formation of bhasha, translation and religious identity, mythicization of local and localization of myth, moral education, plantation of self and plantation of text into a certain culture. With the translation of classic Sanskrit text of Pali, Prakrit and other Vedic text in medieval India, modern Indian languages and the history of modern Indian literature developed. In this era, translation was considered as one of the most powerful tool to fight against the power of newly established Islamic rule in different parts of India. The Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Veda, the Upanishada, the Purana, etc. were translated into modern Indian languages. This was a project of educating the lower caste Hindus and to make them realize about the religious teachings. It was to make them aware in which religious tradition they belong. As the upper caste Hindus who actually confined the knowledge of Hindu religious text only into Sanskrit, and the lower caste people did not have a right to access Sanskrit text or to Sanskrit education. During this time, when upper caste Hindus were very much worried to save their religion from the Islamic ruler, the Kathak Thakura, the performer who used to sing and dance and used to perform the stories of the Mahabharata, the Ramayana and the Purana from one home to another, from one door to another, and at the common place of people's meetings, they started performing. So such kind of initiative was actually the group work of translating the Indian classics, Sanskrit classics and the religious text. So they had a community feeling. They had their very specific agenda of translating the religious text, the literary text of Sanskrit and text from ancient Indian literary and philosophical tradition, and they initiated the performative translation. This is how the myths became localized and the local became mythicized. Many other Sanskrit texts like the Hitopadesha, the Katha Shagara were translated by the order of different kings to educate their sons. Literary works and the translations both were dominated and patronized either by temples or by the royal courts. And this is how the literature, more specifically the translations, were influenced and instructed by the upper class or by the dictators. Beside this religious tension of the upper caste Hindu, Indian people observed another experience of cross-culturalism with the Islamic rule. A new trend of literature and a new force of translation came into being in different parts of India. For example, I can talk about Arakan Rajsabha and Royal Court of Arakan of Chattogram of now Bangladesh, the then Bengal province of Mughal India and later British India, who translated different Persian and Khariboli. Khariboli, I mean the modern Indian language Hindi took birth from the Khariboli. So Arakan royal court, they used to practice the Persian language and Khariboli language very well. The poet Daulat Kaji translated Malik Muhammad Jaisi's Padumabad into Bengali, what became a text of cultural identity of the Muslims of Bengal. And this text has immense influence among the Muslim community, and there was a culture of community reading. So retelling and the performing story was one another form of translating even in modern India by the Muslim communities who used to retell the stories from Padumabad. This happened for the Hindu communities also, because in manuscript culture and when the printing culture was not much circulated among the people of India, the people used to meet in a common place and they used to read a particular text, particular religious or literary or classic text, and that was a kind of community reading, and this is how text used to be translated orally, and text used to be translated with different physical gestures. So in medieval India or in the early modern India, this was another form of translation. And this translation necessarily involved a community. It engaged different kinds of people, the speaker and the listeners. This is how the community was started to be built in medieval India or in early modern India, and translation appeared as community work or as a group work, and it was deeply culturally and it was culturally rooted among the people of Muslim and Hindu communities, with the reading and performing the cultural text of the communities. Now, the same kind of experience of translation, of cross-culturalism, can be found in different parts of medieval India also. I would like to categorize this translation by the phrase plantation of self and plantation of text, as the translation of foreign text into a target language is a very work of plantation, and in this time it was very much necessary to the foreign rulers to know, to understand the taste of the soil of the land to rule, to appreciate, and to be appreciated. It is all about knowledge. Here in this medieval era, translators were very much affiliated either with the temple or by the royal courts, as I mentioned earlier. And the translators, as an unconscious community, used to work under the auspices of the kings or the religious gurus or leaders. So in medieval translation, we can find two kinds of community practice in case of translation. One side, there was the group of performer, there like Kathak Thakura, and there was community reading which had the community feeling, and in other side we can find translators who were patronized by the temples or by the royal courts, and they translated immense number of text from different languages. And I would like to see this practice of translation by the patronization of the royal court and temple as unconscious effect of community practice of translation. Now, the 16th, 17th and 18th century of medieval India observed an immense power of thought among in the public sphere, that in Vaishnavism, and the power of alternative religious thought which came with the Bhakti movement. During this time of movement, poets who are part of Vaishnavism and part of this Bhakti movement translates a different religious text of this alternative religious discourse. A new genre also was written and translated in this time, and that is hagiography. The Ramayana, the Mahabharata, two greatest epics of India also was translated in different Indian languages. The Vaishnavism, which was originated from Bengal and later spreaded in different parts of India, brought many poets together, and those poets engaged themselves as translator also. These translators belong to the community of Vaishnavism, and all of them can be identified under same umbrella of Vaishnavist philosophy. Hence, the translation done by them were also very much influenced by the philosophy of Vaishnavism. And here, when I am talking about Vaishnavism, I am talking about the Vaishnavism which was very much influenced by Chaitanya Deva. Otherwise, Vaishnavism also developed in South India in very early age, and it has immense influence on spreading Vaishnavism all over India, including Bengal. So, when I am telling ki Vaishnavism which is originated in Bengal, I am actually hinting the Vaishnavism which was promoted by Chaitanya Deva. Anyway, these Vaishnavized poets and the translators, they shared this common ideology. The famous translation of this era was like Krittivas's Bengali Ramayana, Kashiram Dasha's Bengali Mahabharata, Madhav Kandali's Assamese Ramayana, Sarala Dasha's Oriya Ramayana, etc. And when Krittivasa was translating his Ramayana, the later history says why Krittivasa was so much popular in Bengal, why Krittivasa was so much promoted, because Krittivasa, who took born in Fulia, which was very near to Navadvip, which was the land of Vaishnavite philosophy and Nyaya philosophy, and practicing the intellectual discourses and dialogues in medieval India. So Krittivasa took born in that culture. So Krittivasa was very much promoted. Though by saying that Krittivasa was promoted with the Vaishnavite culture or the Vaishnavite environment, I don't claim that Krittivasa doesn't have his poetic merit. He definitely has his poetic merit, but this culture also helped him a lot to be circulated among a wide reader, to a larger readership. So this is how community worked behind translation. So when we are talking about the community's role in translation or translators community, it is not only always about the community who engaged itself with the work of translating, but it is also about the community what is playing a great role to promote, to circulate the translated text. And Krittivasa is one of the examples of such kind of practice. Now, let us discuss about the translators community in colonial India. Translation in the age of colonization was mainly about appropriating the Indian culture in the context of high civilization of the British or Europe, appropriating self with the monotheism of the colonized lord. One side, the British and the Orientalists were trying to know India. They established Sri Rampur Mission in 1800, Fort William College in 1801, Asiatic Society. William Carey, a British missionary and one of the pioneer of Bengali prose, tells while translating the Bible into Bengali, he commented that, I quote, "I employ a Pandit with whom I go through the whole in as exact manner as I can. He judges the style and syntax, and I of the faithfulness of the translation. I have, however, translated several chapters together which have not required any alteration in the syntax whatever, yet I always submit this article entirely to his judgment. I can also, by hearing him read, judge whether he understands his subject by his accenting his reading properly and laying the emphasis on the right words. If he fails in this, I immediately suspect the translation." I unquote. This very comment of William Carey, while he was translating Bible into Bengali, this very comment shows that translation was necessarily taken as group work if it is not identified as a very particular community, but it was understood as a group work because of achieving the adequate quality of translation. Translation as a group work not only was practiced for the Bible, for other works also, like in the late 18th century when Lebedev was translating drama for the Bengali stages, he also took help from the Sanskrit Pandits or Bengali scholars. These language experts had immense contribution in the whole project of translation in colonial India, though their names were hidden with power of the whites. The English educated newly elite Indian had to appropriate themselves with the colonizers, the lords. So this class, people like Raja Rammohn Rai, started translating Upanishad to establish the Indian culture of monotheism. Different Sanskrit Pandits like Madan Mohan Tarkaratna, Ramnarayan Basu, etc. started translating Sanskrit text in Bengali, as the then Calcutta was situated in Bengal and these colleges were established in Bengal. These translators were working under the supervision of British Orientalists and working in above mentioned colleges where the British officers were sent for vernacular education. British government establishes school book society. From there they translated many texts by the Indians with a clear political vision of what to teach and what not. School book society emerged as a prominent community of translators in British India. Beside this, there were many small translators society in around the Bottala, which a place of publishing and bookselling in northern Calcutta. This translator society used to translate different official documents of British government and different documents what people had need of in courts and in some other official works. Among different small societies, there were Samaj of the translators like Bangabhasha Anubadok Samaj in 19th century Calcutta. Translational culture of 19th century India showed that whole method and authority of patronization and supervision made the translators in British India to think in a common way for choosing literature, translating it and publishing it. It means that the colonization as a process worked as bridge among the translators working in different areas and sectors in British India, which brought a community culture of common area, taste and method of text and translation. And this is how community works as invisible force and invisible bondage among the translators in colonial India. 1800 to first half of 20th century is also about the translation of European modernity into different Indian languages and literatures. This continuous encounter with the colonized modernity expands the idea of world literature too. This age develops our idea of world literature with the continuous acceptance of British Europe and with the disavowal of it. Later on, since the end of second half of 19th century, our imagination of world literature expands towards other Asian countries and the Eastern European countries, along with Russian literature, especially the literatures which were translated into different Indian languages from the translation center of Moscow. In the first half of 20th century, especially since 1920s, we can find many literary magazines were published, and those magazines started publishing translation of different world literature among with British, German and French. But these initiatives of translating on behalf of little magazines were not as such community work, though each little magazine has their own political agenda, own literary agenda and own sense of aesthetic. In that sense, somehow a feeling of little magazine community was there, and they had chosen particular type of text, particular type of genre to translate. It means little magazine and the people involved with little magazine actually worked as group to choose the source text and to translate it and publish it through Little Magazine. So a kind of group understanding was there in the very initiative of Little Magazines in 20th century. Now let us discuss about the translators community in independent India. After independence in 1947, we find few distinct natures in the practice of translation. Translation one side became a more valuable tool for the nationalists to imagine the newly built nation and to build connectivity among the languages and cultures of India. So translation appeared a state-sponsored activity, initiative of Indian government like Sahitya Academy and Indian Academy of Letters and National Book Trust are similar kind of publishing industry which are dedicated to translate and publish book with a very nationalist agenda of imagining nation and building connectivity among Indian cultures. But not only about the project of state-sponsored nationalism, there are many private publishing houses who publishes the translation of different Indian literature beside their long practice of translating and publishing different world literature. So these private houses feel an urge to publish Indian literature, especially nowadays, as it is about a tiredness of cultural ignorance. I can talk especially about the cultural system of Bengali language, literature and publishing. After the late 90s, people who are attached with academics, publishing and with the Little Magazine movement felt that we know so less about each other. So we should have our knowledge of inside economy of literature. And we need more translation to more about us, to understand us better. Another side, translation appeared as a major tool for the radical activists who felt that the nation has need of an alternative political discourse beside or instead of nationalist discourse. Translation and imagination of a unity with the people of different oppressed classes of the world was conceived as a prime political agenda and perhaps a step ahead on the way to the freedom of the people. Radical political discourse conceives translation as only way to build world brotherhood and most important way to build culture of resistance and consciousness of it among the people. This is how translation contributes to build new identity of the mass. Organization like Indian People's Writers Association, Indian People's Theatre sincerely took part in this initiative. Beside this, there were or are many other private publishing houses with very small enterprise that publishes translation of this kind. This is only the dedication and commitment towards the radical political ideology which brings literature of this kind together irrespective of languages, nations, narrations and cultures. So this political discourse offers a different world literature in India, especially in case of Bengal, as I took several examples from Bengal. So here also another mode of community feeling, rather invisible community feeling, worked behind the work of translation. The community, the people who were feeling to gather the knowledge of people's literature, knowledge of people movement and translating it for their own people. So this is how ideology builds a community feeling among the publishers, among the readers, among the translators, and this is how invisible community worked in independent India or in India just before independence. Now, contemporary India and translator community. Beside Sahitya Academy and National Book Trust of India, there is another significant contribution of the Government of India through Central Institute of Indian Languages, that is National Translation Mission, which was introduced in 2005 to translate knowledge text in different Indian languages. For making a group of trained translators for this project, National Translation Mission offers 21 days extensive translation training course. This mission has particular objective and manual for the translators. This initiative is very much to build a trained community of the translators. There are also few more initiatives to make community of translators, like translation as a skill by the Center for Translation of Indian Literature by the Department of Comparative Literature, Jadavpur University. Now, there are many journals and quite a few private organizations of translators. There is Bhasha Bandhan that translates literature of revolution, movement, people's struggle, people's oppression, literature of conflicts, etc. And this Bhasha Bandhan is published in Bengali language from Bengal. So the readers who are having this course, you can easily relate or easily can find the similar kind of examples from your known languages, from your known cultures. And this is how the whole discourse of our discussion will be increased. Besides such kind of little magazine and private publishing houses, there is Indian Translators Association, what organizes conference and publishes on translation, and it builds its connection with different countries, especially the countries of East Asia. Indian Translators Association says, Indian Translators Association seeks to unite the widespread translators and interpreters community of India at a common platform to address issues for betterment of the industry and take steps to ensure that its members provide services meeting professional standards of the industry. It continues to focus on upgradation of knowledge and capabilities of its members by organizing workshops, creating quality awareness, and following the code of professional conduct. Simultaneously, it constantly acts as an interface between government bodies and affiliates of the translation industry of India. I unquote. There is another prominent organization of publishing, Katha, that publishes translations of Indian literature into English. Katha says, Katha, a non-profit organization working with and in story and storytelling for 22 years now, has more than 300 published titles, including quality translations of fictions for adults and children, 21 Indian languages in the voices of over 600 writers and translators. And they wrote about their publication, I quote, on the other end of the creative spectrum is Katha publishing program that bolsters the reading initiative by producing books that create space for culturally distinctive literature and celebrate the glorious polyphonous multiplicity that is India. With every careful chosen and published title, quality has been the single major idea that drives Katha. We have constantly reinvented ourselves to stay focused on our mission, re-engineered our work to deliver the maximum impact. I unquote. Their slogan is translating stories, transforming lives. Their motto is to enhance the joy of reading for children and adults, thereby helping every child realize his or her full potential to combat social injustice and poverty through active story-based learning, quality education, and community action. And this is Community of Translator chooses their titles accordingly. Now, through our discussion, we can understand the conscious effort of community building or community as an idea came into the sphere of translation only in contemporary era. In pre-colonial time, in colonial time, or just before the independence, or after the independence in India, we can find that community as a sense, as a feeling, community as ideology is working behind the work of translation. The making of forum, making of association, making of organization for the translators is only recent phenomena, and these communities of translators in a recent age have been emerged to serve the nation, to serve the purpose of the government, to serve the purpose of the corporate sectors, and to provide them with quality translation, to have a particular manual and method. And this systematic approach towards the work of translation is a very recent phenomena. Now, if we think about methodology of translation, which is followed or proposed by the community or the organization, we can find that there is very less initiative in it. And the initiative, whatever has been taken, are very recent incidents like Katha, Indian Translator Association, etc., as I mentioned earlier. Sahitya Academy also organizes workshops on translation. Center for Translation of Indian Literatures, Department of Comparative Literature, Jadavpur University. The collaboration of Sahitya Academy has been training the students and scholars and translating and publishing different tribal literature and oral traditions since last 8 years. Here people are taught translating with the practices, and each trainee publishes with one of the most prestigious publishing house in India, that is called Sahitya Academy. This center till now has contributed a good number of translations of such books or such cultural texts which were not known or appreciated much in mainstream Indian culture, like the lecture folktale and songs of northern part of the state West Bengal and Sikkim, missing folk tradition of the state of Meghalaya, Nepali literature from the Nepal and the northern part of West Bengal, folk tales and songs of Kokborok tribe from the state of Tripura, etc. are published by Sahitya Academy. And Center for Translation of Indian Literature, Jadavpur University, also has immense to contribute in this project. And this is how community works and community practices the translation. Translation becomes a requirement in daily use of policy circulation, advertisement, government notices, corporate sectors, etc. So translation is appeared now as a professional work which needs particular skills. Many corporate sectors also appeared for supplying trained translators. There are many government-supported, accredited, non-government organization, private sectors for offering such jobs. One among those is Indian Languages Translation at Language Service Bureau. The site of the bureau says, Language Services Bureau provides high-quality professional Indian language translations. Assamese, Bengali, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada, Malayalam, Marathi, Odia, Punjabi, Tamil, Telugu. Indian language into English translation and English into Indian languages translation. They do in Pune, India. If required, certified Indian language translation, Indian language into English translation and English into Indian language translation can be provided for official documents to be submitted to different government international authorities. Translation are undertaken by native language experts, linguists with in-depth study of the target language, which is their mother tongue, and of the specific domain of the document are chosen for each project. This organization undertakes technical, legal, commercial as well as scientific projects for Indian language translation. This is how professional community of the translators appear in the scenario. Now let us conclude our discussion. Religion is one of the most driven force to build translators community. The Gita Press Gorakhpur is one of the examples that translates ancient Sanskrit and Hindu religious texts in different Indian languages. They sell it in very cheap price and their circulation is very well all over India. Ramakrishna Mission also translates for spreading the words of the Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. We have to remember the strong cause of formation of translator community in India also, that is religion or religious purpose. At the end, I would like to comment that in India, the popularity of translation or translated literature has been built with the translation of literature and by the individual initiatives of translating by the popular creative writers. The trainings what are going on by different organizations are mainly for the technical translations or for the translations of knowledge books. Conscious appearance of community in translation work is colonial phenomena, and it becomes more visible in contemporary India for the growing demand of translation to engage more people with the knowledge of law, with the whole issue of market economy. At the end of this discussion, I should rather say that in the ancient India, in medieval period, and even in British India, all these communities of translators, rather the communities of educated people, gathered because of some common causes, engaged themselves with the work of translation too. In conclusion, I categorize the character of the translator communities. One is the community that is patronized by the power, by the word power. I here mean the power of state, power of the ruler, or the power of the such a community who took part in decision making. The other is the community patronized by the act of resisting power. Power here is the state power, power of the colonizers, and the power of the imperial force, and nationalism as a powerful discourse. And the last one is the very recent phenomena of private and individual initiatives of building translators community for greater fraternity, for finding different methodologies of literary, legal, corporate, and machine translation. Thank you.